Hello and welcome to Full-Time Live on the Fulhamish Twitter, Facebook and YouTube channel. My name is Don Betts and we're going to be looking at Fulham's 0-0 board draw, our first home 0-0 at Craven Cottage in 9 years. But joining me to look back on it is Drew Heatley.
Hello.
And Mr. Statsman George Singer.
Hello, mate.
I think what we'll first do is we'll probably go into our instant reaction to that game. The way I'm looking at it is that I think it was actually vital we didn't lose today, because of the points difference between us and Brighton. I think it would have been 5 points if we lost to Brighton today. And I think the only thing that's making this result probably not look as good as it probably could be is just down to that Brighton win at Arsenal at the Emirates on the weekend. I think if they didn't get us 3 points, these two results would definitely be seen as a positive. What about you, Drew?
Yeah, at first I was kind of aggrieved that I was made to watch that, but now starting to settle in, I'm quite happy that we have a point and a clean sheet. I tweeted during the game that we got it wrong tonight, and by we I mean Scott, but I wanted to try and avoid everybody attacking me. But we got it wrong tonight. It just was about how wrong we got it, and actually the extent to which we got it wrong was that we didn't overtake Brighton and get the 3 points, but actually, it could have been a lot worse, especially when Lallana put the ball in the net. So, 0-0. It's funny because it's a great defensive performance. Like, Anderson has been immense tonight, so there's plenty of positives, but it's always difficult to pick those out when you've been forced into what was quite a turgid affair for 90 minutes.
Yeah, what about you, George? Are you seeing the positives from this, or do you think it could be a bit of a missed opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely see it either way, right? Either a point gained or 2 lost. For me, I'm choosing to be optimistic. I think up to 17th, which is all we need. We're getting a bit of positive momentum. That's a few good results in a row. We've got the clean sheet. I think that there's certainly more positives than negatives. I think all we need to do this season is be the 4th worst team, and at this point we're the 4th lowest in the table. So, long may it continue. If you offer me now 17th place on the last day in May, I'd happily take it.
Yeah, if we go into our lineup to start off, Drew, obviously the one change today was obviously Harrison Reed coming from Mario Lemina. Were you surprised by that change, or were you expecting any other changes to be made to those games? Obviously, with the news that Mitrovic was back, obviously we don't know what his fitness is totally like, but were you surprised, or anything happy that Scott Parker stuck with the same system that worked and the players really that worked so well against Liverpool on Sunday?
I wasn't surprised. I think it's difficult to change it up when you've had a good result. But I also think we should have done. I think that we can remember the last game against Brighton where Mitrovic literally caused them all nightmares, and it was just, for me, it was quite a logical choice to bring him and possibly TC back in place of Ruben Loftus-Cheek. I think the headline for me about today was that we persisted just one game too long with this new formation that we had. I think we needed to be able to adapt it to the opponent, which is what we did when we first brought it in against Leicester, and then obviously we had some positive result there, and we had not a terrible loss against City, and we all know what happened against Liverpool. But it was about changing to face the opponent. I think we should have done that again tonight, certainly with Mitrovic and TC in the starting 11. But I wasn't surprised. I just think it wasn't right.
Yeah, George, do you think in a game where we're obviously going to have a bit more of the ball, I think the possession was probably about 55-45, that was the last stat I saw between the two sides, do you think we should have slightly changed up a bit to adapt to that sort of thing, playing someone like Tom Kearney as opposed to Ruben Loftus-Cheek? Because Loftus-Cheek may offer that sort of physical presence up towards the front two of Cav and obviously Lookman, but he was a bit sluggish today, and maybe you need someone of Kearney's ability to sort of play intricate pass to play these two in, or even someone like Mitrovic to hold the ball up, which you saw when we came on, which we got onto to play in these attacking players? Or were you sort of fairly happy with how Scott Parker stuck with it?
I mean, right, hindsight's always 20/20, right? I think Drew's got it spot on in that there's a bit of a trade-off here, right? Of, do you change your system every week to reflect who you're playing against, or do you try and keep some kind of continuity? Scott went with the continuity route, which is a perfectly valid way of doing things. I think when we see it so often, whenever you get the 3-4-3 or however you want to chop it up, when you get two sides playing the same system against each other, so often it does result in a 0-0 because you've got kind of at either end and in every area of the pitch, you've got the same amount of players. Everyone's cancelling each other out, and I think that's one of the reasons we saw, even though it wasn't the most exciting game, it was a pretty energetic game, right? There was so much of the ball knocking back and forth, loads of dribbling, lots of direct attacking play, but neither of the side could really settle. Certainly not us, and definitely not Brighton. Never really had a chance to slow the game down and play the way that they wanted. So if Scott was purely going for a 0-0 draw, trying to keep the clean sheet and trying to keep the points ticking over, if that was his plan, then he's played it expertly. Although I can't help but think if we were to make a few of those changes, like you said, with a TC or a Mitro starting, the result could have been a bit different.
Obviously, with what we've seen from this tactic, do you think an evolution of it with players coming back fit in? So obviously we've seen Boydek over, he plays so well down on the right hand side, but could you see an evolution of this where obviously when Kene Tete comes back in, he slots into that right hand slot, and we see the likes of Boydek over move in a further advanced position, with the likes of Lookman and Mitrovic and Cavallero in the fold as well, Drew?
It would certainly give us a few more options. My understanding of Tete was that he's always more defensively minded as a fullback, strong in the tackle and a bit sort of voracious in that sort of sense. So I don't know how well he would do, but I suspect being the sort of Dutch international that he is, I'm sure he could adapt, particularly if BDR has done so well in the last few games. So it's completely not out of the realms of possibility. I think as well with the idea of the starting with TC and Mitro starting, I think if they didn't start, which is fine. But I think we had that first half. It was clear to see what we were crying out for, and we could have made a change. Should have made a change at the break, one or two. But Parker has a reluctance to make early changes. And I'm not talking about hauling anyone off in an embarrassing way in the first half. Nothing called for that. But, there's nothing wrong with a halftime change. There's nothing wrong with a change before the arbitrary hour mark, which seems to be his invisible line in his head that he won't make any changes before then. And by that time, Brighton had already sort of eased their way into the game and, got their foot on the ball and started to take control. And it was almost, it was too little too late in that sense if you wanted to try and win the game.
George, if we talk about the first half, it was a fairly sort of turgid affair. It was both teams sort of cancelling each other out. Obviously, Brighton had that. Tarek Lamptey was probably their most impressive player, sort of causing us issues today, I'd say. The amount of times him versus Robinson was probably the most exciting battle alongside it, because everyone's talking about maybe Bassoum versus Anguissa, but I thought both those players were sort of playing different roles. So it wasn't too much of a clash. It was more Reed or Lamina going up against the likes of Bassoum. But obviously, Lamptey put that ball right across the box, and there was no one in there for Brighton to tap it in. We had the chance through Cavallero. Do you think the first half was sort of just both teams sort of sussing each other out and not want to offer too much in case they get caught in a counter-attack? Because we know both teams have the ability to do that with Robinson and Reed, and then with obviously Sonny March and Tarek Lamptey.
Yeah, I think definitely the first half it felt in the middle it was a boxing match between Bassouma and Anguissa. Like there was so much physicality in the tackle. Both players I thought played pretty well. And down the wing, it was like watching a 100-meter sprint with Lamptey against Robinson. I thought Lamptey was superb today. He was clearly Brighton's best attacking threat, and considering his age and considering, nominally playing a defensive role, he offers so much in attack. He's such a strong player, and, struggle to think why Chelsea let him go. But yeah, I think in the first half there was it was a lot of sussing each other out. Neither team really got a kind of a foot on the game. Obviously, the best chance for Brighton came with that Lamptey cross into Welbeck, who, you could say he could have done better, but if he got a toe on that, it's a great chance for him. So yeah, I think probably pretty even first half. And certainly, like I remember putting in the halftime thoughts, it was quite. It was fairly obvious that we were lacking the ability to unlock the Brighton defence. They're a strong defence, and that's no real kind of slant on our team or a diss on our side, who I thought played pretty well. But
you would say majority of Brighton's best players are probably their defensive outlet, whether it's the wing backs in March or Lamptey or the centre backs in the likes of Webster and Dunk.
Yeah, certainly. I think Lamptey and March are players who I've admired a long time. I remember in the game 2 years ago when we won 4-2, he was superb in that game. I remember watching him. He's lightning and the ball just sticks to him. And yeah, those three centre-backs, Webster, Dunk and I can't remember the other guy, all superb. Webster hitting the post from a corner. You know, they're a really tough nut to crack. But for me, it felt like the game was crying out for TC to be in that 10 role of linking the midfield and attack and playing some balls through to Cav and Lookman. And Loftus-Cheek, you know, was huffing and puffing, but not really making much progress there. You know, obviously Parker's the one that gets paid to make the choices, but at half-time I was kind of sitting here screaming for bring TC into that kind of role. And, you know, he has the keys to unlock this kind of defence. So for me, it was a real surprise not to see him come on early or if at all in the second half.
Yeah, Drew. In the first half, obviously, there was the Cavallero pop shot at Sanchez, which he tips over the bar, and then probably the tossing error by a header at the near post that came in from the corner. Obviously, he did well to win at the near post, but there wasn't really too much. It was going into half time. What sort of were your thoughts? Were you thinking, right, it's good, this is 0-0 still, the game is still you know, it's still on our own to sort of attack them in the second half? Were you worried at all that Brighton might come out more motivated in the second half, which we did see, but what were sort of your overriding thoughts, obviously going into half time at 0-0?
It's kind of like what George touched on earlier. We were just so clearly cancelling each other out that I thought unless we made the two key changes I mentioned to try and unlock the Brighton defence, I think we were destined for the 0-0. I think, you know, a lot of us on the WhatsApp group throughout the game kind of knew that it was going to be the 0-0. I couldn't see anything really changing. Even when Mitro came on, he was the difference maker in terms of if anything was going to happen, it was going to come through him. And you could see when he came on for his sort of 10-minute cameo that he was involved in quite a bit, but. Yeah, it was always going to be heading in one direction, I think, particularly at half-time once we came out with the exact same starting 11.
Obviously, George, people speak about obviously the onslaught we faced from Brighton in that sort of 10-15 minute spell at the beginning of the second half. Do you think what that actually showed is our defensive resilience and how much we've improved at the back, and how much, although this system today didn't create too much going forward, it showed how solid it has created us defensively, which obviously we didn't see in the first several games of the season? Yeah,
definitely. I think there's part of, you know, anytime you play five at the back, you are going to be more stable. That's obviously a big part of the reason why Scott's done that. And I thought in general in open play, we nullified the threat pretty well. Obviously, Lallana had the goal rightly disallowed. On another day, you know,
I mean, once they decided what they were checking.
Yeah.
Checking two separate offsides, one from the original cross, then when it touches well, then realised actually the reason why this goal should be disallowed was for his handball, which is what I called straight away. I was like, that's hit Welbeck's hand. Yeah,
I mean, obviously a couple of reasons. You know, on another day, those are, you know, close calls which could go a different way. But apart from that, they didn't do much off open play. I thought if Brighton were going to do anything, it would have been off set pieces. They're a very good set piece team. Obviously, playing three big centre backs and having Dan Burn on the books obviously helps with that as well. But even kind of aside from the tall players they've got, they're a strong set piece side. And again, that's where they prove to be at their best. That's where they hit the bar. So yeah, I think in open play, our defensive structure is working pretty well. I'd say there's more that we can do to be better at defending set pieces. However, that's a statement you could use for this Fulham side and any Fulham side for the last 10 years or so. Defending set pieces has never been our strong suit, and they nearly kind of proved that today.
Yeah, I think there was a couple of corners that Brighton had in that second half where they had three headers. Obviously, there was the Lewis Dunk chance, which was a great double save from Areola. Then I can't remember, there was one that hit the crossbar. I can't remember who Webster. That was from Adam Webster, which, as you said, showed our vulnerability at set pieces. But again, being Fulham fans, that is nothing new to us. Drew, obviously our first two substitutions that we made, I think everyone was looking at it, especially one of them was like, well, what is going on here? The camera sort of, I think it was just after one of those corner chances from Brighton, and then the camera sort of turned to the touchline, and we see Abubakar Kamara and Mario Lemina warming up and ready to come on. And obviously Lemina, fine, understand that, and he was very good when he came on, very energetic in that midfield. And I think him and Reed obviously offer two completely different options in that central midfield department. But then when you saw Boubacar Kamara there coming on, especially at the right wing back role for Bobby Decordova Reed, instead of someone like Kenny or Mitrovic to try and offer something different going forward, I think everyone was fairly surprised when we saw him coming on.
Yeah, it's like you say, the Lemina for Reed switch, if uninspiring, it makes sense. But Kamara, it made no sense. And for all of the attributes that Bobby Decordova Reed has that make him so good in that role that he's been fulfilling recently, love him. Kamara doesn't have those attributes. So, we were all making the same gag about him in that role. And it was just a bit of a strange one, wasn't it? Especially when everybody's crying out for those for TC and for Mitro to do that. That only one of the two is going to come on, and actually both of them were equally as important, in my opinion, to come on in this game and sort of help give us that spark that was needed. We got one. It wasn't enough. I think we needed both. So when you had that double sub, it was kind of deflating in the sense that you knew we weren't going to get both. We were going to get one or the other. I think we knew it was going to be Mitro, but again, Scott makes those changes on the hour mark. We know it's going to be at least another 10 before we see Mitrovic come on the pitch. And then you've only got 20 minutes or less to make an impact. So, subs were completely wrong tonight, and those were particularly baffling.
Yeah, I think obviously Lemina added that energy into midfield. I'm not saying Hansen really isn't an energetic midfielder, but it's a different kind of sort of aggressive energy which Mario Lemina adds. And you can sort of see him getting stuck in pretty much within 5 seconds of him being on the pitch. Obviously, before the Mitchell substitution, Ruben Loftus-Cheek had a big chance where he was through on goal and was running like he had cement in his boots. But he got through on goal. And do you think he realised what the situation was? Because he didn't seem composed enough, George, in that situation. He seemed like not surprised at a shot, but surprised how early he sort of needed to take it.
Yeah, it did kind of smack of a player who's a bit low, not maybe confidence or kind of match fitness or match sharpness. It felt almost like he panicked a bit and didn't quite. I guess kind of comparing it, the most obvious comparison maybe is Lookman's chance against Leicester, which he put away. That's one player who, even though he missed the penalty shortly before, Lookman's high on confidence, played plenty of matches and knows what he's doing. A player like Loftus-Cheek, I think we all know there's a great player there. Like, we've all seen him do really well for England and Chelsea and Palace in previous stints. But he only started 2 matches last season. I think he came off the bench 5 times, but he started twice. He's,
one of the only games we've been playing was the FA Cup final.
I think the 2 starts in the league. I don't know about cups. He might have played a bit more. But clearly, for me, there's a bit of a diamond in the rough there. Of clearly, he is a very talented player. Give him more time. Give him more opportunities. I'm sure he will get his confidence boost. He will. He'll be more attuned with the game and start put those chances away. But unfortunately, now we're kind of at that awkward stage where we need to give him the time so he can bed in and become that great player. But whilst we're in this transition, he's going to be less good in these kinds of chances. So, yeah, for me, it's a bit of a disappointing one. If it came through to a Lookman or even a Cav, they probably would have put it away. Hopefully he learns from it and can do a bit better going forward.
Yeah, and then obviously the substitution came that everyone was crying out for, was getting Alexander Mitrovic onto the field. I think this game was crying out for Mitrovic, even to come on at half-time for someone like Cavallera, who wasn't having his best game, or shall we say, going back to normal. And as soon as he came on, you saw the difference, Drew. You saw he was winning headers. He was fighting with the Brighton defenders. He was showing that passion. He was what we needed to sort of make the ball stick, because it wasn't happening until he came on.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we saw what he could do against Brighton last time we were in the
Well,
Premier.
both games 2 years
Yeah.
ago, he bullied their centre backs. And not many strikers end up bullying the likes of Lewis Duncan at the time, Shane Duffy. Although, as you've seen in the Scottish League this season, every striker seems to be bullying Shane Duffy.
Well, quite, and it's not a million years ago, and Duncan, as you mentioned, is still there. It was exactly the sort of game that Mitrovic would thrive on, and it was one that I just think it was an obvious call. But we've gone over that, we've gone over that. I think it was too little, too late for Mitro on this day. It was just great to see him get back on the pitch because there's a lot of chat about how obviously he's been fully fit and it's in a tactical omission, and we're not a one-man team. We haven't been for. He's our main sort of talismanic striker, but I think it'd be unfair to say we're a one-man team.
I wouldn't say we're a one-man team. I think our record without him in the side shows that. He's just very critical to the way we play when he's in the side.
Yeah, but nevertheless, it's nice to have him back and getting minutes again because at the end of the day, we're going to need him. We need more than one tool to stay up in this league. So the fact that he's sort of back on the pitch was great to see. It was just a shame it wasn't enough to affect the game.
Yeah, George, and obviously the main chance that sort of came, which he had a big impact on, was obviously that flick on for Lookman. I think it's just great play between them both. The sort of idea of Lookman to run in and get to the byline, and then great little knock on, great weight on the flick on from Mitrovic, but perfect even into Lookman's path, and obviously a good block from Sanchez. But that's what we needed in the rest of the game was those little knock-ons for the likes of Lookman or Cavallero to run onto because they were trying to get the ball and create it from these long balls themselves. And when you're going up against all defenders who are about 6'3", 6'4" and above, it simply wasn't going to work. And I think that chance sort of epitomised what we'd been missing throughout the entire game. Yeah,
I mean, for me, I think that chance was 90% Lookman, who had a superb game again. That guy does not stop running. I don't know how he has the energy for 85 minutes. You look around, everyone's starting to wind down. Lookman does not stop. He's continually harassing in defence. He's continually making runs. He's offered so much to the side for a lone player who hasn't necessarily played a huge amount last season. He is putting absolutely everything into these games. So before we come on to the chance, fair play Lookman, he's been absolutely superb. And yeah, it's great to see a bit of a link-up play happening between Lookman and Mitrovic. I think as a strike partnership, they could be a really interesting one to play together a bit more. They're offering very different kind of skill sets.
I said even earlier on when our defence wasn't as solid, we saw against Sheffield United away that now them two were our key players, and we saw how good his goal was, him driving forward. He actually got a bit of a lucky with the ball coming against him, but we showed. I think those two together, although we've been great in these last few games, well, we won't deny that. When we're playing teams who aren't the top six, I know we are playing some more of the top six teams before the end of January, but when we're playing the teams who are in and around us, I think the Mitrovic-Lookman combination looks like it'll be a much better option for us.
Yeah, I think looking forward to the next game, obviously Newcastle away coming up. I think that's going to be a really interesting one. Clearly, for obvious reasons, Mitro is going to want to play in that one. He wants to play in every game, right? But Newcastle away has a bit of added spice for him. I don't think the current system, this 3-4-3, suits Mitrovic. I think the strikers need to be more mobile, and he doesn't necessarily suit the system. But that's not to say we can't come up with a new system.
Yeah, do you think if we are
some of the lower teams,
if we are going to play in this way, it would the way it would work would have to be Mitrovic dropping deeper with let's say a Reed and Lookman or a Cavallero and Lookman darting forward ahead of him?
I think we can't have Mitrovic as the sole striker if we're going to play on the break. He's not. He's I guess the archetypal opposite of a Jamie Vardy. You could play Jamie Vardy on his own up front. He plays that role perfectly off the shoulder of a defender. Mitrovic is not that player. So if we're playing less with the ball, we want to be more of a countering side. We need the option with pace who can stretch the defence going forward. So Mitrovic
I
clearly
mean,
needs one
I said
partner.
you can clearly change this into a 3-5-2 in having, I'd say, Lookman next to Mitrovic, and then you can have someone of likes of Kearney, which I would probably bring in against Newcastle, behind them. We saw this kind of against West Ham, didn't we?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a few different systems, and I think it's going to be interesting. I guess the issue with this is like if you did move to that system, then you lose. Whilst I certainly don't think Cav had the best game today, he was pressing quite high up, and he put in a good defensive shift. Like he wasn't great, he wasn't standout, but he did put the effort in, and he did do a lot of pressing, particularly against the opposition fullbacks, which got us the ball back a few times. So, whilst putting a Mitro and a Kearney in more central, more static players, yeah, that will give us some advantages when we've got the ball. But it's worth reflecting that actually we might lose a bit in defence. Again, you've got to weigh it up. We've got to take a look at Newcastle and see, okay, what roles can we live without? Where do we want to punish them? And I hope Scott kind of tweaks the setup a little bit, because I'm not sure that rinsing and repeating this 3-4-3 again is going to be the right thing for Newcastle.
So, Drew, if you look at the state of play at the bottom of the table right now, obviously we're in 17th with 9 points ahead of Burnley with 9 points on goal difference. Obviously, they've got 2 games in hand. One of them's tomorrow evening against Aston Villa, so hopefully Villa can do us a favour for once at Villa Park. And then obviously we're only still 2 points behind Brighton, which, as I said at the beginning, it is sort of vital that we didn't lose tonight, because if we lost, I think, as I said, it would have been 5 points or 4 points behind Brighton, and that would give them a good gap. And obviously, well, I mean, it looks like one of our other relegation rivals at the moment are Arsenal, because again they couldn't beat Southampton at home today. So I think that's 4 losses and 1 draw in the last 5 home games or something crazy like that. But do you see, when looking at the table and looking at what could have happened, is it just that because if Burnley obviously didn't beat Arsenal, they'd be sitting on 6 points and they'd have been below West Brom, and we'd be 2 points clear of West Brom. And if Burnley won their game in hand, we'd still be ahead of them on goal difference, for example. So do you think it is just that Burnley win against Arsenal that's making these 2 results not look as positive as they should be?
I think it's always difficult to gauge when you draw a couple on the bounce. It's the old adage is it's better to win 1 and lose 1 than to draw 2, but I don't necessarily buy into that when you're down the bottom of the table. I think momentum is momentum, and you need it no matter what. So I'm feeling pretty happy, to be honest with you. Like, if you look at the way we started the season and look at us now, and the fact that we're well in the hunt, we're well in touch, as George said, we're where we need to be. If the season finished today, we'd stay up. So there's absolutely every reason to be optimistic and cheerful, frankly, at the moment. We've come through some really, really hard fixtures. We're coming up to the hectic Christmas period where everything can change. And we said if we can get to the Brighton game and be in touch still, we'll be happy. We came into the Brighton game and we could have overtaken them with a win, and we're out the zone with having just drawn with Liverpool as well. So I think all things considered, we're doing all right, and we're exactly where we need to be. And everything's going to look a bit different in January as well, and hopefully better for us rather than anyone else. I'm not too concerned about the Burnleys yet and the teams around us. We just have to look at what we're doing and be the 4th worst, as unglamorous as it sounds, be the 4th worst team in the league.
That is the aim this season. That was the aim going into the season, to be the 4th worst team in the league, essentially.
Yeah, and we're doing it, and the moment we are. So until tomorrow, we absolutely are. So it's I'm very, very comfortable at the moment.
Cool. If we take some comments from obviously YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, we start off with Twitter. We have Paul here saying, "Should Lamina start over Reed here on out?" Start with that with you, George, on that one.
I mean, I think they both played pretty well. I don't think either of them have been particularly standout, but I guess they're the kind of player that you can trust them to give like a good 7 out of 10 solid performance. So for me, I don't necessarily see there to be a clear answer of one or the other. For me, I think this shows that we've got 3 really good defensive options in Lamina, Reed and Anguissa, and we're going to need 3. We want to keep them fresh. We want to keep them fighting for the same positions and giving everything in training and giving everything in matches to keep their position. And we've got the busy Christmas schedule coming up. So for me, if Lamina starts over the next game, I've got no issues with that. If Reed starts, I don't mind. But I think Scott finding a way to rotate through the three of them, keep them all fresh, fit and hungry, I think that's going to be the key for me.
Cool. We have Adam Waite here on YouTube saying, "Oh, he was scared when Anderson was holding his ankle." I think we all were when I saw Anderson holding his ankle. Thankfully, he was having obviously Upson gave him man of the match, and he was today. He was absolutely superb once again. He's been sublime really ever since he's come in. Michael White on Facebook has come here saying we looked toothless up front tonight. We definitely did in that first half, and until Mitrovic came on, I tend to agree. We weren't recreating anything. January can't come quick enough. Drew, if you're looking at the January transfer, do you think attacking options is definitely somewhere we should be looking?
I think it has been for a while. The problem we had for the longest time is whether it was right or whether it was just a perception. Perception is reality. You have Mitrovic is our number one striker, and he looked, I guess, on the outside almost undroppable. So to get somebody in and to come in was going to be really, really difficult. The caliber that we needed. You look at somebody like Danny Welbeck. Maybe not exactly what most people would want, but he would have been somebody that we probably did look at, and somebody probably turned around and said, "I don't want to come in and sit on the bench with Mitro." So the upside to Mitrovic not playing these last few games is that now that perception is going to have shifted, and somebody's going to come in and say, "Well, okay, well I might not be plan A, but I'll be plan A.1, or we'll be switching up, and I will get a lot of games in this Fulham side, depending on the way we play." So I think we're going to have a lot better chance of getting somebody through the door in January. Whether we do or not, of course, is anyone's guess. But I should imagine we'll be looking, and I should imagine it will be better chance of getting somebody than we did 4 games ago.
George, so going into the Newcastle game, if you're looking at any tactical changes, obviously there's one obviously I'm talking about is obviously Mitrovic hopefully to come in, but if you're looking at adjusting us tactically to sort of set up and try and beat Steve Bruce's Newcastle, who got battered 5-2 by Leeds today, what would you be looking to change?
Oh, good question. I guess we know that Newcastle have an amount of decent strength. They've got some nice players in Wilson and Fraser who can play with pace and play with attack. I think keeping it solid at the back is going to be important. For me, I guess kind of linking back to one of the things we mentioned before about the Ola Aina piece, who for me, I don't know if this is a bit of a lazy comparison, but when I think back to when we had John Pansel as right back, he only looked defensively solid when you had a winger in front of him who was supporting him a huge amount. You had a Damien Duff or a Simon Davies who was always there and supporting him and giving him someone to bounce off. And I think for me, Ina's been similar with Deckard over Reed. And I think if we're going to change the system up and push Bobby forward, I do worry about Ola Aina and whether he can handle that on his own. So I think for me, if Kenny Tete's back, great. I think he can shift into that right back role, and that frees Bobby or another player to be more attacking and more advanced. If Tete's still out, then for me, I think we keep the back 5 and maybe just switch a Kearney or a Mitrovic in for one of the other players, like we've said.
What about you, Drew? Obviously, would you be looking to get Kearney alongside Mitrovic in on Saturday?
Yes, George raises interesting points. Like, you could be tempted to say revert back to the tried and tested Parker ball formation, but actually, tweaks could be the order of the day. We've all seen that. Loftus-Cheek, he's almost Chambers, Callum Chambers-esque in the terms of, are we playing him in the right position? Is he going to thrive if we move him somewhere else? Because he's not really doing anything at the moment, like when we tried to persist with Chambers as a centre-back. Anyway, I would say that tweaks are probably the name of the game against Newcastle. Bring in a TC. I would try and bring in both, but I'm wary of saying, just doing wholesale changes and reverting back. I understand that when there's a good run going on, you have to try and keep that sort of that momentum going. We haven't lost tonight, so it's almost. I've talked about how Parker would change his when he does his tweaks and his changes, and it goes well, like it has done. He's been sort of. I can't think of the word, but it's gone right for him. So basically, he's allowed to do it. He's got credit in the bank. So I think he should probably probably sort of just do a couple of tweaks, but I'd definitely like to see Kenny come in on the weekend for Loftus-Cheek at the bare minimum.
Yeah, same with me. I do want to see Mitrovic and TC both coming against Newcastle. I think Lookman obviously is in a bit up as sometimes he should be staying in the side, but I think even if we're just taking out Cav and Ruben Loftus-Cheek and bringing in those two, I think that would definitely make a difference. Just because I didn't think either of them offered a lot tonight. Cav, I think, looked a bit tired. He wasn't really making any sort of darting runs in behind. I know there wasn't too much space in behind their defence, but yeah, bringing Mitrovic on to sort of battle the likes of Kieran Clark on the weekend. And TC sort of create things for nothing, and obviously he's got a history of scoring absolute bangers away at Newcastle United. But this has been the full-time live on the Fulhamish Twitter account, Facebook page, YouTube channel, wherever you guys have been watching this. Thank you very much for tuning up. Thank you very much for Drew Heatley for joining me as well.
Cheers, guys.
With Mr. Statsman himself, George Singer.
Thanks, chaps.
Yeah, make sure to sort of keep tuned to the Fulham Future. Tomorrow we'll have the Southwest 6 Essential with Jack Kelly and Joe Sampson. And on Friday, I'll be chatting to NABFC Matters Steve Rafe, looking at Saturday night's big clash up at St James's Park. But yeah, this has been full-time live on Fulham 0, Brighton 0. This has been Fulhamish. Have a good night, guys. You Whites.
You Whites.